Welcome to the Unicom Channel English Department. To the lecture today, be with us. Initially, we welcome everyone and salute all the attendants and honor us the bright, great view of bright faces, the seeker of knowledge and truth in order of awareness and the human advance. Be with us and to the lecture today. So, to there.
Welcome to today's lecture. It is one of the very important lectures within lectures Convoy to Evolution 15 Foci of Origin in Stage of Transformation Toward Living Beings. Above all, the recipient and the follower of lectures of Unicom Creed must understand that these materials are inference according to the visualizations of Unicom philosophy. And their vision of origin of universe and evolution of existence, and they depend on observation across the human mind, taking into consideration history of universal experience and history of experience humanity, based on theories and scientific and laboratory experiments, knowing that philosophy of Unicom does not believe in theories of creation or existence of a creator having a relationship with origin of universe or fate of existence, given that all metaphysics are visualization and imaginations resulting from activities of human mind. And to know that the Unicom Creed is not a religion, and does not recognize the necessity of religion as a factor of importance to human life, but rather the Unicom Creed is an ideological dogmatic approach. You can organize your life according to it practically, and it obviates the importance of religiosity, and sees the need for the human being to organize himself according to mental consciousness and knowledge of things and the fact realizations and scientific, and thus society and its activities. It must be set up and organized according to strategies to confront nature and requirements of life that preserve the existence and safety of human and happiness of human societies, and lead them towards lasting prosperity, and developed for all with acceptable justice. Definition. What are the foci of origin? Foci of origin. It is a new term in science and philosophy, which the Unicom philosophy introduced to it for the first time. It was a conglomerate of aggregates of compounds, mixtures, elements and products of their interactions. They formed a colony and were placed in what crucible? Then they created presence to a united entity, through systems interactive and interconnectivity, and reciprocal each another, and coordinate in a central entity capable for activity and growth and self-evolution, and copies of same entity and continue in the existence, through the supply from the origins of constituent elements of it, which found in nature around it. Using the colony's components and its members as functional tools to perform tasks of supply, it is equally vulnerable to decomposition, disintegration, degradation, and fading. As a result of intervention of any element or entity that is not related to its base components, or in the event that any of the entity's members is unable to perform its tasks, or because there is a lack of natural provisioning requirements, however, it is able to continue to exist by copying entities similar to it from itself, through the activities of reproduction with the identical ones in the original and the formation and fully compatible with the existence of the entity. And these complex entities have remained in a state of drought, ballooning instability over millions of years, during a period of internal development, before being active in stage of transformation towards reproduction and increases in development, to start each focus of origin, form one being of genital binary growth and develop its members and tools, according to requirements of its life and natural capabilities of centralizing its systems, until it appears to be a complete living being with its own dynamic style and external form, and it copies itself in production of others, with availability all the reproduction and reproduction tools inside it, while the new transcript is be more advanced through mutations forced by the surrounding circumstances. while enables them potential energy of capabilities for the original internal components that created its existence. The beginning of the journey towards life was a cruel and painful venture, and not as imagined by theology and dream imaginations. So, Foci of Fountainhead, which became beings with complete contents to perform the tasks, were not in form of present living beings. They had no extended bodies and limbs and were not moving from one place to another but fixed in wherever they formed. But rather the first entities were only small core balls of compounds and mixtures, including contents of brain, which carry all the requirements of copying, attraction, merging and development. Only it was in a stability situation, due to absence of life code related to element of oxygen and light energy, and both of these factors were in complete absence, that is, they do not exist on the planet Earth. Throughout billions years of dry interaction between the elements which made up the compounds and mixtures, the planet Earth was dark, very dry, and extremely cold, and these characteristics were confirmed by numerous scientific theories. Before fall of icy planet, there were physical fluids on the ground, mixtures and elements and not water. Because the water compound was not available to dissolve over billions of years, and was not part of the components of the planet Earth, but often it was a rare compound, very solid. Included in its formation a number of gases, including oxygen, hydrogen, and other natural gases, which formed an ice planet with an independent presence within the solar group and outside the Earth's gravitational factor, and often it existed before the Moon's presence, and it was shielding the planet Earth from the Sun's rays. But the direct fall of sunlight onto the icy planet over millions of years caused numerous interactions, led to the evaporation of many constituent gases, and solar energy managed to penetrate body of ice planet that caused chemical and physical changes in it, led it more fragile and less weight. And then happened the sudden fall of ice planet on the Earth planet, often through a naturally event, pushed it inside vicinity of Earth's gravitational influence. It is possible to say it was a collision with another planet, or collision with one of stars, such as the Moon that is closer to the Earth while rises away from it gradually. But the important thing, the fall has occurred, and the expected reasons are many. With fall of icy planet on the Earth planet, ice has scattered everywhere on surface of Earth and covered it completely, entirety, and the entire Earth planet has become immersed under the ice. And science has talked about the skin era on many occasions, but they did not find an explanation for that before this. After this falling, many explosions have occurred and continuous. And many compounds have been liberated, and many elements, including oxygen gas, which was part of formation of incoming planet, and the sun's rays invaded permanently the planet Earth. And the solar energy penetrated to its depths, and the water compound has been freed, which in turn began to penetrate between Earth's planet compounds and seep into their depths, and generating potential electrical energy, and the dissolved water compound became a means of transferring energy between nuclei of constituent elements of Earth's planet compounds. Then activated the interactions and explosions, and the internal movement of electrons and neutrons, and happened their burning and ignition operations under the ice. And the affected icy planet continued in the melting, and freed the water compound and the oxygen element, and new mixtures were produced, and infiltration of oxygen through the dissolved water complex, and in the presence of solar energy, infiltrated to depths of nuclei of rare compounds, which are foci of origin for living beings, and served as code of life that launched process of vital activity in the rare compounds, so they moved in field of internal communication and copying and building and growth and development. Then was stage of transition from the physical elements to living beings, which continued for millions of years. And scientific research activities referred to the bacteria and red granulocytes that represented the first living cells that lived without oxygen, but they in fact It was in a stage of rare compound stages, which later became foci of origin, but it was in the stage before receiving the code of life and reaching stage of transformation towards growth. So became their interacting, and growing, and evolving biological compounds under the ice which became gradually melt, so that it penetrates between the soil compounds and creates communication processes causing explosions in the ground, and temperatures rise, while more ice melted and more gases are released. Under these circumstances progress process of transformation and change in the rare compounds which became foci for the establishment with biological change and development of size and components of formative assets that formed the central mind and focus of developing entity, which by itself developed cells that are specialized devices to operations of senses, to meet the central requirements and deal with the outer environmental around the organism, and thus became surface of Earth planet and its interior as billions of vital active diversified foci in varying and numerous phases of transformation, growth and development, and vary and similar according to elements of their basic components and their historical circumstances, and on these foundations came its varieties or species from foci of living beings, some of which have basic components, simple and few. They are closer to the physical compounds. Some of them have basic components, simple and few. They are closer to the inanimate compounds. And some of them are simple, complicated, and some of them are deep and very complex, and thus range between plant patterns and animal patterns. And some of them which they didn't remain as inanimate and they didn't attach to the complete transformation. And from them they took an interlaced pattern between the plant's patrons and animal patterns, and thus isolated the living compounds, which on their way to become living beings, taking from the inanimate compounds and the elements which remained in their condition as a natural material as sources of supply and to this day. And these transformed beings from the material became the first foci of origin for strains of living beings which roam the world right now. Foci of origin were continuing in creation and development of central cells of origin for the senses and traits, which resulted from environmental influences, and the circumstances and the requirements to confront them, and multiplicity of components of origin and their capabilities and the available supply elements. Whenever the composition for focus of origin, less complex and less in terms of basic components and available to them circumstances of growth and transformation, it moved from the stage of developing the central mind to the stage of developing the senses and tools which to carry out their roles. Developed to them devices for the biological functions for the being, then developed the extensions of body and the limbs to catch up with the requirements and catch them, and developed means of protection, then developed means of continuity and its tools for the self-transcription, for survival and continuity, and thus the plant beings emerged in the foreground early. Precedent the animal beings, then strains of animal beings rolled out in the prominence according to the period they settled in developing the central mind, before declaring their complete transformation from complicated material compounds to sophisticated animal beings, the emergence of human beings at the end of all these animal beings, according to the complexities and abundance of basic components in their foci which created their breeds, which spend the longest period of time, exceeding the periods spent by all foci of origin of other beings in building and the development the central mind and the cells of origin, which gave the human mind the opportunity to develop the qualities and tasks that transcending the capabilities and qualities of minds of all other beings. And by that ability of human beings and their standards became based on the mind and not in the body, and if we compare standards of beings in terms of strength and capacity of their bodies, will be there are many animal and non-animal beings that will surpass human beings in the struggle for survival and continuity in existence. So it must always be remembered that the value of human being and his strength is in his mind and not in his body. It It is noted that nature still follows the same its historical methods in process of creating, re-renewing and copying. If we contemplate germination of seeds of trees after a process of adding water to them as a code for beginning of growth process, and periods of pregnancy in the animal beings after fertilization are almost constant since millions of years. Why? Because the process is the same specialized cells that process transcription of assets of same number of cells and differs from an animal strain to another, according to the complexity and multiplicity of its formative assets, and the time period needed by the cells responsible for the transcription process according to what they have inherited from a developed skills in copying the assets and developing them to be a similar new being that is capable of growth. We may be able to find a concealed mystery of similarity between what happens at moment of germination and pregnancy in living beings, and the stages in which foci of origin of living beings reach beyond the transition stage from the physical compounds to biological beings. In order to reach neck of this extended period without end, we have to summarize it as follows: that the rise in the temperature of the planet Earth and the volcanic eruptions resulting from the interactions of the components have created plateau, cavities and grooves on the surface of the planet Earth, and some of them extend to the depth. While the gradual melting for the ice, it turns into a water compound, evacuates the elevated places and occupies the cavities and the curves places. Either the elevated places that have become in direct confrontation with the sun's rays, the plants began to grow open towards space for photosynthesis, then developed the greening process and the equation was completed, and it was satisfied about the development process and stopped its development for the central mind in a very early stage of sensation, and focused on process of rapid transcription and the increase through a biological being, with double genital cells or bilateral genitals components, that is, develop a system of internal self-reproduction in a single being, and retain transcription and growth factors. This was a stage of development stages in which across through it all strains of biological beings, while plants stopped here according to their formative capabilities and became practiced to this day, while the biological beings continued to develop the reproductive process according to what they have from the circumstances and basic components. And since that stage, plants started growing and increasing everywhere, and separated as different type from the animal beings which were advanced in evolution. Even here we can conclude that the reasons for diversity and variation between strains patterns, whether they are plant or animal creatures, are due to the basic components and conditions. Then that the plants which similar each another physically or chemically, same such as the physically and the chemically similarities between patterns of living beings, that are due to the basic components and the circumstances, and that plant beings have life systems parallel to animal beings, even though plants absorb water compounds, oxygen, and photons of light, and their bodies consist of substances that are starchy mixtures. So are also animal beings that drink water and use oxygen, light, and blood in their bodies of meat, and consists of bone and mixtures of glands and their products, and feed on plants in order to obtain materials to build their bodies. Then the question: what are the basic components of systems and users of living beings? Here lies the origins of the relationship and the historical differences between all living beings, plants or animals. And from here we jump to the foci of origin and strains of animal beings, how they were, how they evolved, and how they diversified. And until we meet in our next lecture on foci of origin of animal beings and their strains, do you salute. Goodbye.